Before we begin to dive into the linear and the circular economic models, it is important for us to understand what is an economic model. An economic model is a simplified version of reality that allows to observe, understand, and make predictions about the economic behavior. The purpose of a model is to take complex real-world situations and pare it down to the essentials. If designed well, the model can give an analyst a better understanding of the situation and any related problems. A linear economy acknowledges development in a linear manner. It starts from resources being extracted from the Mother Earth, their processing during the production process, and finally being added to the landfill at the end. With the depletion of natural resources at a faster rate, this model is becoming an ecological burden. In this course, we will discuss the current model of economic progress, linear economy. We will discuss how we got into this model and the role of industrial revolution in enhancing a move towards a linear progression. A linear economy is an economic model where raw materials are used to make products which end in landfills after a short-term usage. Ecologically, all energy, resources, and nutrient cycles allows the resources to return to the environment, making the system sustainable for long term. Carbon cycle, water and nitrogen cycle, nutrient chains are an example of flow of resources in a circular and sustainable manner within an ecological system. It's only with the advent of industrialization that these cycles begin to shift away from sustainability. Businesses adopted a linear approach of take, make, dispose model. The model was highly profitable and generated an unprecedented level of growth. Within the soaring demand of resources and massive waste generation, the entire model became unsustainable. This diagram represents the flow of raw material in a linear economy. The first industrial revolution started around 1760 through the advent of steam engine. It replaced agriculture with textile manufacturing and hand production by machines predominantly in Europe and the United States. Textiles, iron production, and chemical manufacturing were the major industries at that time, which saw a huge change in the production processes. It was a major turning point in history as it influenced every aspect of daily life. The average income, development of trade, a rise of businesses, and population began to exhibit unprecedented growth. The increase in the average income improved the standard of living of the general population in the Western world. The second revolution was termed as the age of science and mass production. With numbers of invention in science and technology, industry gained pace. Gasoline engines, airplanes, fertilizers affected the assembly lines in the factories, which resulted in mass production. Henry Ford's company was one amongst the first to start a groundbreaking assembly line with gasoline engines in early 20th century. A huge percent of population started to relocate to the urban areas in search of better prospects. By 1900, 40% of the US population lived in cities compared to just 6% in 1800. Along with increasing urbanization, inventions such as electric lighting, radio, and telephones transformed the way people lived and communicated. Digital revolution is the third revolution that the world has seen. With inventions in semiconductors, computer, and internet, the entire world was connected wirelessly. A lot of industries were disrupted, especially communication industry. Electronic and information technology began to automate the production and made supply chains global. With these rapid advancements in industry and technology, the production boomed and consumption patterns changed. Easier methods of extraction, labor availability, cheaper processing of resources brought the cost of production down. The communication and digital revolution connected the entire world. Massive production was accompanied with the era of marketing. All consumer entities started promoting their products at mass scale through TV broadcasts and radio advertisement. This was the beginning of a fast-moving consumer market. The natural resources were extracted, processed, produced at massive scale, and marketed to the consumer. With the advent of plastic, the supply chain became easier than ever. Most of the packaging products were replaced by the wonder polymer because of its strength and cost effectiveness. Metals, glass were replaced by plastic in all sorts of packaging materials. However, due to lack of any strict policies, most of the supply chains ended with delivering the product to the consumer. No manufacturer bothered about the ecological impact of ruthless extraction and dumping. Most products were manufactured as single use. The consumer would use and throw the products after one cycle of usage. The bottles, caps, cardboard packing were thrown after the use. Cutlery and crockery were replaced by disposable plastic products. The life cycle of the products ended being dumped somewhere either in the landfills or water bodies. This type of economy, where the product life cycle is linear, is known as linear economy. Fast-changing fashion, use and throw policy directed the world towards a linear model. Today, we see that linear model of economy has its own harms. Depletion of natural resources, losing resources in form of waste in the landfills, greenhouse emission, pollution, etc. It is important to understand that linear expansion brought its own challenges. In this chapter, we shall discuss about the disadvantages of the linear model. Today, we see that linear model of economy has its own harms. It is harmful in two ways: depletion of natural resources due to infinite demand and losing the resources in form of waste in the landfill. Current business practices in a linear economy assume a constant supply of natural resources. Post-consumer waste is dumped in landfills to be never extracted again. The net worth of resources at the end of the cycle is zero. Landfills, on the other hand, are a major concern today. They not only emit harmful gases, they need a huge area which could be otherwise better utilized. It has environmental and economic disadvantages. It is both economically and ecologically inefficient model. Such a model of economy is bound to be unstable. Since maintaining ecological balance is essential for human survival, we must save our natural ecosystems. Trashing the linear model to adapt circularity is the only option. Linear model has served the companies so well for more than 2 centuries that it is difficult to make a transition. Human activities have resulted in trashing the planet. But unfortunately, the current model still treats the impact of waste as someone else's trouble. Earth's ability to absorb and process waste is diminishing fast with time. Factors such as increasing population, technological advancement, need of raw material, and eroding Earth's resources combine to create an urgency for transcending to sustainability. The enormous production of goods is a challenge for the ecological system. Infinite demand creates excessive pressure on life-sustaining ecosystems. Self-recycling and cleaning resources like water, air, and soil are not able to keep up with the production cycles. In a take, make, dispose mentality, each step is critical to ecosystem. From extraction of material to it ending in the landfills, every step has its own ecological impact. Extraction. Extraction of natural resources consume high energy and water. It also leads to toxic emissions in the air, water, and soil, thus polluting them. This disrupts the other natural ecosystems. Excessive deforestation has destroyed forests. It impacts in soil erosion, loss of biodiversity, contamination of groundwater. Carbon emissions during the process affect biodiversity. Production. Manufacturing cycle involves high energy and water consumption. Production of products often has a negative impact on the environment through air pollutant emissions, toxic waste disposal, and water contamination. Production houses are also the major offenders when it comes to greenhouse gas contributions. One of the studies suggests that factories alone are responsible for nearly 2/3 of the emissions to blame for global climate change. Waste in landfills. Unsegregated waste buried in landfill sites has all sorts of waste. It could have organic, electronic, construction and demolition waste, plastic waste, and much more. The decomposition of organic waste releases gases like methane, which is potent greenhouse gas. Methane traps up to 72% more heat in the atmosphere as compared to carbon dioxide. Methane from landfills is a major contributor to global warming. Rainwater percolates in the landfill sites and dissolves organic and inorganic constituents. This results in formation of highly toxic chemicals which leach into the ground and get mixed with the groundwater. The groundwater at the base of landfill site usually contains high level of toxic metals, ammonia, and pathogens. These toxic substances can also impact the soil quality of the surrounding areas. Apart from hampering the ecology, the linear economic model also jeopardizes the supply of materials. Fluctuating prices of raw material, geopolitical dependence on different materials, scarcity of materials, and increasing demand creates an uncertainty in the supply chain. Other impacts could be: first, fluctuating raw material prices. The fluctuation in prices of raw materials in the market have increased significantly since the last decade. The companies dealing in extraction and processing of raw materials are facing a challenge as the investment in this sector have shown a downward trend. This will lead to increase in prices of materials. In addition, these price fluctuations prevent companies from making price forecasts, which gives them a weaker competitive position than companies that are less material dependent. Second, critical materials. The current linear model is based on mass production, despite the fact that some resources are available in limited capacity and thus are critical. Metals like indium and chromium in computers and electronic industry and in metal industry are used indefinitely. Since these materials are only available to a very limited extent, they should be recycled. Third, geopolitical dependence. Increasing trade practices increase the geopolitical dependence. This is not limited to provinces or states, but intercontinental. Countries in Middle East are rich in oil but lack water. They export crude oil but dependent on other countries for their food grain requirements. As a result of this interdependence, the scarcity of one raw material will have a widespread effect on the prices and availability of many more goods. Fourth, increase in demand. A surge in aspiration in the middle class and increase in population has increased the demand of raw materials. The decrease in lifespan of products has also put pressure on the consumption patterns of materials. Lifespan of a product is inversely related to the waste production. Consumers want newer products at faster rate than ever. Immediate measures that economies could adopt in order to be sustainable includes reduction in endless extraction of raw materials, treating waste as wealth, promoting innovative ways of reusing the waste, and reducing consumerism. The world needs a growth model which is waste-free. This would help in preserving and regenerating material value and natural resources. Economies have started a migration towards recycling. It is the first step towards circular economy. Once we develop a mindset of recycling, circular economy would seem to be an easier step. The below diagram explains the gradual shift from a linear to circular economy, which we will discuss in the coming chapters. For sustainable growth, the resources should be allowed to return to environment through a complex web of cycle. Studies have shown that human civilization has triggered Earth's sixth mass extinction event. The current practices would only deteriorate the situation. We need a restorative design that could help in resource recovery. We need to redesign the way we conduct business. The production cycles, human activity needs to be realigned to the ecosystem. According to Ellen MacArthur Foundation, in face of sharp volatility increase across the global economy and proliferating signs of resource depletion, the call for a new economic model is getting louder. In the quest for substantial improvement in resource performance across the economy, businesses have started to explore ways to reuse products or their components and restore more of their precious metals, energy, and labor inputs. The time is right, many argue, to take this concept of circular economy one step further, to analyze its promise for businesses and economies, and to prepare the ground for its adoption. Having understood how the current system led to giant heaps of landfills, along with the need to augment continuous extraction of raw materials, one can understand the need to bring about a transition that would stabilize the balance between production and consumption patterns. In the following chapter, we shall understand how circular economy could replace the existing system. The current economic model has been successful in generating material wealth in the industrial nations up to the 20th century. However, this model has demonstrated weaknesses in the new millennium. An ultimate breakdown is a possibility in near future. Based on the data of professional sources, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation states that the commodity prices have met a tipping point in 1999 and the previously declining material costs gained a volatile upward momentum. There is a critical need to identify innovative models to ensure sustainable growth without straining the finite pool of natural resources. Circular economy, through its different business models, provide businesses an opportunity to decouple growth from resource requirements, thereby enabling much more efficient and effective utilization of resources. We have discussed linear economy and its disadvantages in the previous chapters. We understand that there is a need to switch from the concept that prevails in our society for a long time, the linear economy. The current model of production and management of goods and services seeks to promote short-term consumption and is leading the planet to an unsustainable situation. It is the opposite of the life cycle of nature and collides with sustainable development focused on the long term. In nature, there is no waste or landfill. All elements play a role continuously and are reused in different stages. In a linear economy, the shelf life of products reduced drastically with increasing consumerism. With industrialization and globalizations, businesses push more and more products at lesser and lesser prices in the market. From PET bottles to cheap and tensile packaging solutions were introduced by the industry. This led the world's economy to boom in early 80s. Indefinite mining, uncontrolled deforestation, massive industrialization came with their own side effects. Giant heaps of landfills, climate change and greenhouse effect led us to think about our wrongdoings. Untimely floods, extreme snowfall in the Arctic zones, droughts, shrunken glaciers, melting ice sheets are just a few examples. We have witnessed the loss of sea ice, accelerated sea level rise, longer and more severe heat waves. The plant and animal ranges have shifted and changed in flowering patterns. This is when we started to realize our mistake. Any change in the ecological balance impacts human species as well. There was an utter need to curb climate change to redefine the growth. The current economic model needed a change. This is when the strings were pulled and we started thinking of an era which was pre-industrialization. The time when resources were limited and the cost of their extraction and production cost was huge. At that time, most of the resources were either reused or recycled.